Good afternoon. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and I want to do our chart lesson for the day. And you can see, even though the market closed up about 10 points today, um, really there was nothing going on today. The volume is very low. There's very little volume, very little movement. All of the movement was here in the overnight. We broke out of that range from the last few days. Here was that range from the last few days. We broke out of that in the overnight last night, and we continue to work higher. So that's obvious that the only way they're able to move the market is when the volume is extremely low and there's nobody else trading, which you can look at this movement today and tell by the lack of bars that there just wasn't really anything going on. And so there's just not much good. The trading's just not very good right now, and I don't know what to say other than just hang in there. It'll come back, and when it does, it'll probably come screaming back, and that'll be your opportunity to make it up. And just don't get caught on the wrong side when it does come back. But anyway, let's talk about today. We really opened up right in this area right here. And let me just back out and give us a little bigger view right here. And really the entire range was really, for most of the day, was from 1287 to about 1290. So it's really a 3 point range from the open till really till late in the afternoon when we finally broke a little bit lower and then we still stayed in another 3 or 4 point range. It just happened to be a little bit a couple points lower than it was earlier today. So really the only way to trade a range that's that tight is to sell the highs and buy the lows, and there weren't really a lot of lows to buy this time. Um, so it was a little bit difficult making any money today, but really the only way, as you can see, you always hear me talk about the key entry points, and they were all up here at this high. That was where prices were turning, and even if you entered up here, you had to kind of sit and wait it out as prices fought their way back down. The best entry of the day was right at the open. This was right after the 8:30 open. We had a break above this congestion area right here, and you probably would have had this line right here earlier today. And hopefully with that line right there, you can see that very clearly, that break higher that instantly fell and closed on its very low. So that's a bearish reversal type bar. Entering short right there was a great entry. And you can see that was the best entry of the day, really. And then we had a long entry right here. You could have entered here and here. This was a nice bounce off of the low. Either one of them was good for a scalp. If you caught this one, you might have got a couple of points off a runner. I don't know if I'd have even traded any runners. I probably would have scalped out at least right here on my runners. So you could have got a couple of points still possibly. Entering up here, the entry would have been right here because that is a two-legged move. And you would have had to sit there and fight this one out. If you're like me, you probably exited with a tick or two of profit when it got hung up here, because that's the way I teach you to try to do it. And it was probably, you could have ended up getting a nice scalp out of it. But really, when this thing stalled right here, I went ahead and just took me a couple of ticks on that trade. And I believe I did the same thing right here as well. But by this time, our line was up here. Probably would have had it right here, and I probably would have moved it down. I usually keep them off the last closes, and each time we had lower closes, I would have moved it down. You can see how that starts to, each time as you move it down, I would have had it right here, and that was the high that time, and then you move it down to this close, and look where that high was. So that's generally where I like to watch for the closes. They're more important. The stems are, you can't ignore the stems, but generally the closes are more important. But sometimes I'll look for the most touches, and you might have had more touches right across there. But either way, this trade would have been a lot more obvious if you moved it down. Then the next time I would have moved it down to here and then down to here. And look, see on those closes, look what happened when it pulled back right here. So learn to watch for those closes and keep your line, kind of watch for reversals where your previous closes were. And on this bottom, we would have moved it down to here, and you can see there was the closes, and look where it bounced the next time. Then this time the closes were right here, and look where it bounced. So watch those closes; they're very important. And but you can see these shorts here based on keeping your line moving with and finding the most touches or finding your closes and so forth. You But that was your 4 best trades, or really there were only about 3 really good trades off this. This was a pretty good setup here. Again, you might have got trapped and got scared out. But each one of these highs, look how each one of these highs is a little bit lower and getting back in the range, and each one of these lows is getting a little bit lower. That's a good sign that the market is working lower. So that might have helped you to hold on right here and try to ride this out and get a little bit more out of it. So, and the same thing coming up as the lows start to get higher and the highs get higher. That's generally a pretty good sign. And generally you'll go up and test the other side of the range. And remember, because we were following these closes down, that's exactly what this did. The range just got smaller right here. And so keep that in mind as well. And again, once we got down to these closes, again, look what happened. If you put your line on the closes, that's where it bounced. Then here was the next closes. We move it up. That's where it bounced. And it bounced again right over here. And by that time, you kind of had most of your lows right along here. That's pretty much what I would call this support area is 1285.50. There weren't very many entries in here. You could have got long blindly off this low all the way across here. So if you wanted to trade this afternoon, which I doubt if you're like me, you didn't hang around because it wasn't worth hanging around for. But if you did trade this afternoon, really the best way to do it was just to buy these lows, and because that's really all that was going on. So there were about 3 or 4 trades across here. It was really too late to take this one, but you had a couple of nice trades right here that you could have taken and got a scalp out of them. This one was not so good. The trend was pretty strong down at this point. This was just congestion. But this wasn't a bad setup. Again, you had this bullish reversal bar, and it did take a few minutes for it to take on off, but you never would have gotten stopped out as long as you kept your low below the signal bar. This is your signal bar that you go long 1 tick above it, or you either just buy blindly down here and put a hard 2-point stop and don't give it any more room than that. That's the way I generally like to do it, but I don't like teaching it that way because too many traders then that don't understand price action tend to lose trading that way. So I don't teach it that way a whole lot, but that is generally the best way to enter when you're trying to catch these lows and these highs. Just buy them blindly and keep your stop. As you can see right here, if you sold this one blindly, I'm not sure if you would have survived. If you would have entered at 12.90 or 12.90 and a quarter, this went to 12.92. So yeah, it looks like you probably would have survived if you entered at 12.90 and a quarter. You would have survived that by 1 tick, and that's generally about what it takes. If it goes much more than 2 points, it's generally going to go further. So that's the reason I usually stick with a 2-point hard stop, because that tends to keep you in the trade without giving it too much money and giving you a chance to survive if it goes a little further than expected or it breaks through. So keep that in mind. Don't give it more. Definitely don't give it more than 2.5 points for sure. But I would say stick to 2 points until you know what you're doing or reading the price action a little bit better. But there's just not much happening. And all I can tell you is this is where it really pays to be patient and to wait on the setups, wait on the support and resistance. And definitely don't look to enter across this middle, what I call thin areas across here. If you put a line across there, you can see it a little better. You can kind of see the lows and the highs, and you can get caught on either side, and prices can go the other way. Just like right here, they get in the middle ways and they go back and test the high again, and instead of coming all the way down to the low. And again, that's probably happening because people are watching these closes, and you see what happens. You know, there was your closes. We would have moved them up probably to right here, and then when we came back and tested it, that's where it bounced. And then we would have moved them up to here, And you can see we did get a bounce there. You can tell by the way that bar looks we got a bounce, but it didn't hold this time and it went on through. So, but I would have ended up with my line right across there. But anyway, it just wasn't much happening today. And this may continue for a while. Most of your movement's going to come in the, in the overnight, and pretty much what they'll be able to do is go say, hey, the market closed up 10 points. Everything is great. But don't believe it, because all that movement was in the overnight, and once the regular market opens, there's just nothing happening. And actually, we're working lower during all that time for the most part. It wasn't much lower. Nobody really wants to sell this market. Everybody's scared to sell it, but people are afraid to buy it as well. There's just too much uncertainty out there with the Europe issues going on and so forth. So just trade carefully, follow the price action. Use your stops. That's the biggest thing I can tell you, is keep your stops in place. Don't widen them, and don't move them, and you'll do fine. So this is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and this is our chart lesson for Tuesday, January 2nd, and we will see you next time. Thanks.